Hello and welcome back to Hydroponics Daily, your go-to podcast for everything soilless cultivation. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Sharp, the founder of Utrema Limited. And I mentioned on the previous podcast that I was interested in finding out if you could grow mushrooms hydroponically. And by that I mean without the use of soil or really without cocoa or peat. Can we do a true hydroponic grow of mushrooms in an inert media or in a liquid media? So we're going to do a fact-finding mission to find out if this is possible. So unlike plants, where we provide them with light and nutrients, and then they photosynthesize, they take CO2 from the air, they take the oxygen and the hydrogen from the water, and they make sugars, and they're what we call autotrophs. Fungi are not autotrophs. They can't make their own food. They're like you. They have to get it from organic matter, either from a plant or sometimes from an animal. And they can live off living things like the pathogens of your plants, like mildew and bud rot and things like this, or they can live off dead and decaying matter. And that's what most edible mushrooms do. They are living off dead or decaying matter, like the button mushroom and oyster mushrooms and things like this. They feed off dead and decaying matter. Exception would be something like a truffle, which I think is a mycorrhiza. Let me just check that. Yep, that's a mycorrhiza. That's why it can't be cultured in a normal conventional mushroom farm. It has to be wild harvested. So most of the ones we're talking about are saprotrophic fungi. Okay, and a lot of people consider fungi to be plants because they're non-motile, they don't move, and they live in soil normally, but they are more closely genetically related to animals than they are plants, and so that's something you need to consider when we look at growing them. So I mentioned on a previous episode, I would not grow mushrooms commercially in the same place I was growing hydroponic crops. That's because the number one pest of mushrooms is fungus gnats, and if you get fungus gnats in your grow room, it's a world of pain. And so you really want to avoid a big influx, a big infestation of fungus gnats coming in from, and vice versa, contaminating both ones. Because a lot of the things that you use to control fungus gnats in your grow room will be deleterious to your mushroom cultivation. And also, you're not going to need the lights as well. So you get rid of the lights because mushroom cultivation doesn't need lights. The only lights you need are for you to work your way around and look at your crops and look after it. So if we're getting rid of the soil, and the organic matter content of the soil, what can be reused to replace that? Well, they're going to need a food source. So you can use pasteurized straw for oyster mushrooms. That's very common. Sterilized hardwood sawdust for shiitake. Spent coffee grounds is often used for urban mushroom cultivation. And even cardboard, grain, soil hulls, even corn cobs, the bits left over when you have corn on the cob. So none of these are soils, they're just food source. So in theory, that is hydroponics. But really, when we talk about hydroponics, we're looking at liquid culture, hydroponic mushrooms in its truest sense. So this is where you grow mycelium, which is the groups of strands of mushrooms. So mushrooms are made of hyphae, which are single-celled strands, and then they group together to form a bit like the strands of a rope formed to make one big rope. Think of the hyphae as the single strands of cotton and the mycelium as the rope. And so in liquid culture, the mycelium are suspended in nutrient-rich water, often with sugar or malt extract. So it has to be super sterile apart from the fungus. So there's no soil, no substrate, just fungal biomass floating and expanding like a brain made of noodles. All fungi are made from these hyphae. So if you get a mushroom and cut it up and put it under a microscope, you'll see that they are made up of hyphae. Unlike a plant, which is made up of different types of tissue and things like that, or a human, everything fungal-based is made of hyphae. So some companies are developing mycelium bioreactors or stainless steel tanks for growing mushroom tissue, like breweries growing yeast. So yeast is a single-celled fungus, but these mycelium bioreactors can grow multiple-stranded fungi. So can the liquid-grown mycelium fruit mushrooms directly? Well, usually no. You still need to find a final solid material for the mushroom to anchor to and form its fruiting body. So while you could grow them up in a bioreactor, these mycelium, they then have to be put onto something like sterile straw or wood for it to produce the fruiting body that you were going to eat. Now, for the mycelium, you can produce in the bioreactor mycelium products like alternative meats or flavourings. Things like corn is a fungus-based mycelium product that's grown in a reactor, and that happens at industrial scale. But if you want to actually produce a mushroom or a toadstool or something edible, a structure, then you do need to move it from that liquid cultivation to a solid material. Can they be grown on rockwool or perlite? Yes, you can grow it on conventional hydroponic grow media like that, but it is inefficient. Rockwool and perlite offer structure, but no food. They are inert, they don't break down. That's why we use them in hydroponics, because they don't rot. And the mushroom wants to rot them. So without any extra food, mushrooms would starve. So you'd have to soak your rockwool with sugars or a nutrient broth and keep it sterile. It's really not the best option for that. So you could look at that. And then you could also look at converting a grow room or a grow facility or some hydroponic equipment to grow toadstools or mushrooms or with peat or cocoa, and that's very common. Not true hydroponics, but as close as probably the easiest way to do. So why don't we start calling it mycoponics or fungiponics? If anyone's done this, please let me know. If you've grown mushrooms in a liquid broth, it could be one of the way forwards. There's a lot of interest in sort of the illegal areas for growing hallucinogenic psilocybin, and also trying to make that legal. So a lot of people trying to make magic mushrooms and hallucinogenic mushrooms and cultivate them. And people have got licenses to do that in many countries. And there's a big push for producing psilocybin, that hallucinogenic compound found in a number of mushrooms, for control of depression, drug-resistant depression. So maybe, and I think a lot of homegrown mushroom production the technology will be advanced because of people doing it illicitly, just like the hydroponic equipment was moved on. A lot of vertical farmers have illicit cannabis growers to thank for the technology that they use in their big industrial, in highly invested farms. And the same will go for the future mushroom production. I think the work that's being done now for small scale psilocybin magic mushroom production will actually be, although illegal, will be innovative and will produce a lot of workarounds for small scale production. So if you're a hydroponic grower looking to expand your crop lineup without adding soil, you could probably try oyster mushrooms as a good start, and pasteurized straw or coffee grounds. You could experiment with liquid culture jars, or go big and build a mycelium bioreactor. It's not something I would do because I'm a plant scientist and I tend to not get involved with anything that involves animals or fungi unless I can help it. We do some work with biopesticides and culturing mildews here at Utrema. In a lab, we culture a mildew species that is used specifically only in blackgrass, a weed of arable crops. It's one of our big products, but that's as far as we get into mycology. That's that for today. What else could we say? There's obviously fungus gnats are the big pest. If you're in a liquid culture, that's not going to be an issue. Your biggest problem will be bacterial contamination, and controlling that and making sure you are compliant with all food safety regulations relating to that. There are a lot of nasty chemicals used on conventional mushroom cultivation, or certainly there used to be, and that's why you should always be advised to brush your mushrooms at the very least to get all the peat off them, because the peat contains some nasties. You can wash your mushrooms, but they go a bit jelly, don't they? They go a bit squidgy because of the chitin in them. So, I'm your host, Dr. Russell Sharp. You've been listening to Hydroponics Daily. If you've enjoyed this fungal detour, let me know, and I could bring on a specialist mushroom scientist or a commercial grower to do an even bigger dive next time. So, until next time, stay soilless, enjoy your hydroponics, and I'll speak to you soon. Goodbye.